It's a day for ultimatums, apparently. For anyone who has not been keeping up with the NBA, which I get it. Kevin Durant met with Joe Tsai, the owner of the Nets, in London over the weekend, according to a report from The Athletic. And KD gave the Nets an interesting ultimatum to either trade him, as he's already requested, or to fire Sean Marks and Steve Nash, the general manager and head coach of the team. It's, a nice little development, to say the least, in terms of this Kevin Durant trade saga. Not something I was necessarily expecting. How did that hit you? What did you make of this situation Durant has now put the Nets in, Woz?
It came out a few weeks ago that they were going to have this meeting, to basically meet face to face and have a talk about next steps forward. I had no reason to think that anything different was going to happen, but just to bring the listeners in, if you talk to people who have been around Kevin Durant, who have a good idea about the type of cat that KD is, in the past, he's been a very malleable dude, let's say, okay? Able to change his mind, change how he feels. He's constantly evolving. That's a charitable way to put it. Some people might say he's a flip-flopper. Some people might say, oh, he's spineless. But it depends on your reading, right? Like, he's a guy who's able to bend and change his mind. And so I think it's possible that Joe Tsai was like, all right, let's take this guy's temperature. In the past, in Oklahoma, in Golden State, he was a guy who changed his mind. So they wanted to check that out. But there was no indication that KD was going to be backing off from his trade request. And also, I think the shot happened when they didn't offer his best friend Kyrie a long-term deal. They wanted something with caveats, with incentives tied to playing. They didn't want to just give him, here's 5 years, here's the most we could pay you and keep it moving, which is what we've seen happen to superstars basically since the Supermax happened. At no point has any team stood up to any superstars and said, this is what we're going to do. And I think you're seeing why, Rob.
Well, if there were ever a time to stand up to some superstars, this is certainly an interesting one, because the Nets have done everything within their power organizationally to empower these guys, to make them basically full partners in the decisions the organization has made to this point. And so to say, like, this is where we're going to put our foot down, it's an interesting development, to say the least. I wrote about this for TheRinger.com today. You can read more about it there. But just the idea that what Durant is doing now, it does feel like an extension of everything he and Kyrie Irving have been doing for 3 years.
Yeah.
In terms of calling their shots, making it pretty clear what they want in this case. I guess the question is any of this what Kevin Durant actually wants? Does he really care if they fire those guys or not, and will that impact him staying? I don't have a good read on that.
I want to go back to something, though. This is not that surprising as a sort of as a timestamp on when the Nets would decide to do this, because this experiment hasn't borne any fruit. Yes, granted, KD was hurt that first year, but following these guys down the path of doing any and every single thing that they say every single time has gotten them nothing of any consequence. Joe Tsai has paid a lot of money in luxury tax. And not to say I'm not feeling sorry for Joe Tsai, because I don't give a fuck about that guy and his money. I'm just saying, from that perspective, you can say I've invested in the idea of letting you guys have a huge outsized influence on the organization, and it's gotten me bupkis. I traded a bunch of assets for James Harden. I got rid of Jared Allen for DeAndre. That man, he made the all-star team last year, Rob. DJ is barely holding on to a roster spot in the league at the end of somebody's bench, and they basically just gave him, literally, we say giveaway all the time. They literally was just take this fool off of our hands, because because Kyrie and KD love DJ so much. So you do that. You fire Atkinson for a coach that KD gave approval of. You hired a novice in Steve Nash. You bring in James Harden, give a bunch of stuff away from him. He's ticked off because you're still kowtowing to Kyrie. Then you trade James Harden for a dude who doesn't like to. It's just it's been one calamity after another, Rob. So to say this is an interesting point, I don't know. I think it makes sense at a certain point. Like, you take enough abuse, you break up with the person.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at the final ledger here, which is 3 seasons with these two guys. The Nets have won 56% of their games, which is just below the Lakers, the Grizzlies, the Raptors. That's kind of where they've been regular season-wise. They've won 1 playoff series during that time. 1 playoff series. How you would look at this and say, I want to sign up to continue, I'm gonna clean house even more than we already have to continue the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving experiment, because let's remember, those two things are tethered together. Like, I don't think you get KD to stay if you're also going to trade Kyrie Irving. So you're signing up for more of that, all to continue something that hasn't really worked. Like, I get why the Nets signed up for this in the first place. I think if we could turn back time and do this all over again, and I were the Nets, I'd probably sign up for it again, to be honest with you. Like, I think you're betting on certain probabilities to break in your favor that just didn't. And maybe not betting on a global pandemic to throw just a gigantic wrench into the whole Kyrie Irving situation. But I don't know. There's not a lot of warm and fuzzies here to bank on in terms of like, this is why this is our guy, and this is why we're going to bow to this particular kind of gesture from him.
Yeah, and if you're Joe Tsai, like, if you have even half a spine or backbone and KD comes at you with an ultimatum, it's like, KD, where does it end? Like, now we're firing the coach you wanted?
Yeah.
And Sean Marks. And again, like, let's just say in some fantasy, let's just say we were playing 2K, and KD got these guys fired. I'm sure the new GM would have to get KD approval, and it'd be like, oh, Kyrie, don't worry. We'll give you your extension in January. We'll pretend this thing never happened and everything would be kumbaya. But we know that won't happen because the report comes out, even if ESPN ignored it for 6 hours, which is another just hilarious story that we're not allowed to get into on this show. But the report comes out from Shams in The Athletic, and then finally Joe Tsai puts out a statement about 6 hours later saying, I'm backing my guys. I'm backing my coach and my GM, which is basically, okay, again, KD will be out of here. He's still on the market, and it's done.